We're going to continue this morning in the Gospel of Mark. We'll begin in Mark chapter 4, verse 35. Before we do that, I want to ask this question. You know, we often sing about being more like Jesus. We want to be more like him. We want him to be seen in us. It's interesting going through the Gospel of Mark. What's the typical life in the day of Jesus? How early does he get up? Mark 1 and verse 35, he got up very early in the morning. He's praying. That's right after a night in Mark 1 and verse 32 when he's up very late at night and the crowds continue to come. You got to wonder, did he sleep at all? We talk about people being on 24/7, 365. He was yesterday. Yeah, weary, but continued to serve, continued to minister. And so that's the typical day in the life of Jesus, even on the Sabbath. Just like the day that we'll begin to consider in Mark chapter 4 and verse 35. Mark 4 and verse 35. On that day when the evening came, he said to them, "Let us go over to the other side." It's been a very full day. He's been out in the boat just offshore with all the crowd along the shore. The disciples have been on the shore. Their job that day was pretty much like crowd control. But can you imagine his disciples being among this huge crowd on the shore, all the questions they're being asked, all the people that are challenging them, like, why are you following this guy? Everybody had a full day. He says, well, let's go over on the other side. How many of us and how many of them likely thought, hey man, it's late. What about supper? You know, it's late. We worked all day. It's time to clock out. Well, Jesus said, let us go. What's that mean? Is there any wiggle room in that one, Jill? One of the strongest forms of a command in the Bible is let us. No stated reason. He just said, let us go. So in verse 36, leaving the crowd, they took him along with them. That means they're doing the paddling. They took him along with them in the boat, just as he was, and other boats were with him. And there arose a fierce gale of wind, and the waves were breaking over the boat, so much that the boat was already filling up. And Jesus himself was in the stern, asleep on the cushion. And they woke him and said to him, Teacher, do you not care that we are perishing? And he got up and rebuked the wind and said to the sea, Hush, be still. And the wind died down, and it became perfectly calm. And he said to them, Why are you afraid? How is it that you have no faith? They became very much afraid and said to one another, Who then is this, that even the wind and the sea obey him? You've been around me long enough to know I'm always looking in a passage, I'm always looking for the bookends. There's two bookends in this. Verse 36, just as he was. Therefore in verse 41, who then is this? Just as he was, he then proves who then he is. They took him along. They're paddling. You know, at least 4 of them are fishermen. It wouldn't take them long to paddle 6 miles across the sea on a good day. And so at best, this isn't going to be much more than a nap. Just as he was. What's it mean? Weary, tired, worked all day, didn't take any provisions with him, didn't pack a bag, didn't pack food, didn't get stopped by the ATM or anything like that. Just go. You know, I've often imagined this because it's pictured that way, that it was just the disciples in one boat out there. It's a bunch of boats. A great many in that crowd who had come to that seashore came over in a boat. There's no telling how many are out there in the dark of night on that sea. They're seeing what's happening here. They're also watching Jesus and seeing him just as he was, and perhaps they too will determine, well, who then this is. The typical fishing boat was 28 feet long and 7.5 feet wide. And all those boats, from what I read about them, they're all basically that same form inside. They're all getting overwhelmed with water. They're sinking. No doubt about it. They're going down. And all reasonable conclusion would be they're all going to die. But that question in verse 38, what a question. Who do you think's talking? Who's asking the question? Likely. Who does it sound like? Peter. Sure. What a question. Teacher, do you not care? A rabbi was not only the teacher, he's also solely accountable for the student's well-being. He's their guardian. In that teacher-student relationship, he is the student's everything. He is their life. They depend upon him for teaching. They depend upon him really for their life. And so, do you not care that your own students are perishing? And using the word perishing, do you have no concern at all that our souls are going to die out here tonight? That's what he's asking. You can sleep while our souls are being destroyed? Ooh, what a question. Yes, sir.
So I did a lot of ocean fishing.
Uh-huh.
And the wind comes up, and sometimes the swells get close together and steep. And you look at, you see white caps in the ocean. They're called growlers. The wind will just come and flip the top of that thing, and it can put 50 gallons of water in your boat in a moment.
Just at the peak of the wave, it cuts the crest off of it?
It just slices it off, dumps it in your boat, and we have modern bilge pumps, but still panic sets in. It's like, so those boats didn't have valves.
Yeah, and as the waves just stack up one after another.
You get a couple of those in, and I think you'd be in a big panic.
This word care, I mean, they really are asking, are you not at all concerned about our lives? What a question. I was thinking, pertaining to caring for souls, I was interested to turn this scene around. Here in this scene, Jesus is sleeping, and the disciples are frantically waking him. What's going to happen about a year after this? Yeah, that's exactly what's going to happen. Jesus is wide awake, and twice he'll find Peter and the disciples sleeping. In Mark 14 and verse 3, he asks, could you not keep watch for just 1 hour? Amazing. Does Jesus care? Now, yes? Well,
in a sense, I mean, it's like, we and we're tired, like when they slept that night, or it's like, I mean, you think it would have been saying, Jesus, we're going to protect you here in the boat.
here's the very real human truth. They've seen Jesus heal and everything else.
Right.
But he can do that for everything else. When does it really matter? When it matters to you. Suddenly, you cared enough about all those people. You don't care for us? How can you be sleeping? He goes out of his way. He changes his schedule for anybody that comes to him. But here, you not care?
They didn't have the urgency in the garden to get the water.
Yeah, their life wasn't on the line in the garden, was it? Here it's on the line. That's when you ask these kind of questions. I mean, if something is amiss in your faith, it's that kind of terror that causes you to ask, do you not care? It's, at this time, by this time it should be obvious that he's cared. But it is different when your own life is at stake. I mean, does Jesus care? More so, they're asking, Jesus, do you care what they're going to say about you? You come claiming to be the Son of God. You come claiming to do all these miracles, to heal and forgive sin. Do you care what they're going to say about you? You're going to prove your enemies right. You're going to prove that you're a worker of Satan if you can't save your own people. I mean, there's a lot on the line here. And so, there's going to be definitely an answer, and it's a sharp rebuke. There's two rebukes in this. First, of the wind and the waves. They're rebuked by Jesus' word. And then the disciples are going to be rebuked by two questions. Now, hush, be still. What's proven in this? What's proven? When he says hush and the waves are still. Absolute authority, absolute control over heaven and earth. Since he is the creator of heaven and earth, he's Lord over heaven and earth, he certainly has control of it. And so, if you think back to the creation, man was given authority over the animals and over many things, but one area of authority that Jesus retained for himself is the control over nature. And hush, be still is intended really for the disciples' hearing. You know, it's already been proven that Jesus can control things. He can heal without saying a word at all. So this is really for their hearing. They need to hear this. The word for hush has a double meaning. It does mean calm, but on the other hand, it means a person is silent because they have been struck dumb. They're struck speechless. A synonym to that word for hush is the word that says forcibly muzzled. By the answer, they're struck dumb. And so, then two rebuking questions. Why are you afraid? Why are you so intimidated by the waves? Again, it's this matter, Jill, when it's personally your life at stake. How does that change your thinking? The word afraid looks like our word for delirious. I mean, you're basically losing your mind. Delirious is an acutely disturbed state of mind. Well, how is it? How are you, my disciples, who have been with me all this time and seen all that you have seen, how is it that you can be in such a disturbed state? In other words, how is it that you have no faith? Literally, the question is that you yet have no faith. Uh-huh.
So if you go back to that, don't be anxious.
Mm-hmm.
Anxious there means to be pulled apart.
Yep.
So with you, that what you're saying about losing your mind, basically,
Yep.
you're being pulled apart, so you can't think straight.
Yeah, I mean, what happens to most people when you get that terrifying piece of news that you never wanted to get, and all of a sudden it's just like, oh, I'm going to die, or it feels like you are dying in your soul. What happens to your thought? Why do you not yet have faith? I mean, he's saying to him, now men, you knew I'm here in the boat with you. Just a moment, Lyle. So how can it be, after all that you have seen and heard, that you are not yet convinced that I care for the souls that are dying? Yes, Jan?
I don't know, I'm in a situation, let's say, when I was younger, and somebody was driving a car very sick, and I'm trapped in that car. And it's not just fear, it's anger. And it's because you have no control. And I think that has a lot to do with...
That's exactly the point here, really. Yeah, exactly it. What is this crisis of faith? What is the crisis of faith that people still find themselves in today, even Christians. It's that fact. You're not in control. Now, these men have followed Jesus for quite some time. But there's still this little sense that, hey, you can imagine the crowds, they're coming to these disciples, they're asking for information, and they seem to have a lot of say, and all of a sudden, whoop, you don't have a say over anything. How can it be that you're not convinced, essentially the question, that I am the Son of God? What will it yet take to establish your faith? That's the fact, being without faith. And the result is they became very much afraid. Y'all know I always like those kind of phrases where they stack it up like that. The original phrase is phobio, phobos, mega. You got a powerful verb, a powerful noun, and a strong adjective. I mean, here is this fear. And I want you to see the verb there is passive. Passive. By what they have seen and heard, they ought to be convinced. Because they're not, it is God who is causing those who are without faith to be afraid. That's what it means here. I mean, he's using this storm to convince them. And so they are much afraid. The Lord is stirring the water here. And for a purpose. It is because of that reason. Without the lesson is because without faith in Jesus, you have cause to be fearful. You have cause to be fearful. And so if you're concerned about your soul, you best be asking, as it does in verse 41, who then is this? Who then is this? If you desire to know who Jesus is, God really can't give this kind of calm assurance, this stillness in the soul, without your knowing who Jesus is. Without being convinced that he is indeed concerned for your soul. There is no peace, really. There's no way to be calm without knowing who Jesus is. Verse 36, again, just as he was, Jesus was giving himself day and night to prove his concern for souls. And so in verse 41, who then is this? What has to be the conclusion? Earlier in the passage, they're not yet convinced. Are they? Will they soon be convinced? How do you become convinced? In all these parables, those who will truly be Jesus' disciples, how do they become convinced? By asking that kind of question. Who then is this? Who then is it? What's the answer? Pardon? Deity. Absolutely. He is Messiah. He is the Savior of souls. Much of the Gospels is evidence that the one who is called Jesus was none other than the Messiah. Most people didn't want to believe that he was the one. Everybody had their own idea. Even these disciples, before they were called to go, they all had their idea. They all thought they knew already what the kingdom of God was and who's in it and who's out of it. And being Jews, they were in it. They all had it figured out, they thought. And so they do, in essence. He does have to rock the boat, doesn't he? He had to stir them up to let them know who's really in control and who's not. And who can only be the Messiah. This one who indeed cares for souls and is proving it. And so, what's he doing? Typically, every day, all day, well into the night. What's he doing? Up early in the morning praying, encouraging his disciples, setting out the course of their day for them, always with them, always giving instruction. He's healing demoniacs. He's encountering day by day the opposition. I'd like to face that every day. Every day. He's answering the enemies. He's preaching and teaching at every opportunity, and when they turn around and ask questions, he's up late at the night explaining the answers. It is fascinating, really, why these disciples are so troubled by the storm. We've already touched on it. Because in that moment, they realize they are absolutely powerless to do anything. I suspect almost every one of us in this room have been in that place, haven't we? When life goes berserk and the challenge before you is taller and stronger than it's ever been. Sometimes it might even be better, you think, if you died. But how do you get through that? Yes, Joe?
Well, I guess a question on, they were seeing them go, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so this must have been something pretty big.
This was extraordinary.
I mean, it had to be, because I'm sure they had been in storms before, so this must have been like,
I mean, because it is a miracle, it's extraordinary.
yeah, and I don't know if they ever fished, well, they did fish at night though, they did, they said they did fish all night, so.
They,
weren't.
I mean, these were men that were confident in their skills as seamen.
So this was something that even, something that they were maybe living from, was way out there.
I mean, their normal course of living depended on that. But suddenly, there's nothing normal in this, is there? That's when it really gets tough, isn't it? That when everything you count on being something that you can handle, you can't. Wow. That's,
Used to be comfortable with, but all that.
I mean, he's just suddenly proven that in this situation, as a matter of life and death, you alone can do nothing. Isn't that, yes, Jeff?
Well, that's what I was just going to say. He used that example, something that they could handle. They could in storms. They could handle it. They were confident in themselves. But yet he put something in their life that was more than they could handle. Even though they were playing with all that. I mean, it'd been different if he had put some farmer out there to vote. It wouldn't have taken much.
Yep.
But he put them in a position, and it's the same with us, where we think we're the most confident. That's generally where God is going to test us the most.
And that's why it's important in that phrase I mentioned. It really is God, in this case, stirring up the water. He's got to unsettle these guys to prove them, to convince them that they're going to depend on Christ and nothing else. Nothing else. It's these kind of situations that cause us to do that, isn't it? You can name the times. It's fascinating. They know, here's the truth of it. No man can save himself. Isn't that the lesson? Doesn't matter the situation. I think back to a couple of the preacher students at Bear Valley, fine young men, but they were raised in very godly homes, lives that, were, and they really had the sense that if they were forgiven of sins, they didn't have to be forgiven of much. It's that kind of thing. I mean, really, they really didn't have cause to, they felt like, to be so burdened down with sin they knew to be forgiven. But hey, like Cornelius, these were really fine people. And so sometimes you got to be shaken to realize that doesn't save you, does it? He's got to rock their boat to cause them, and he's very much doing it, he's causing them to know that they cannot save themselves. And so when is it? He says, why do you yet not have faith? When is faith become trust? When does faith become trust? When you give up any presumption of being in control. Isn't that what he's asking? To give up any presumption. Doesn't mean you don't have some responsibilities and all that. But the lesson is establishing who is in control. They've got to know that they can trust him. In the midst of life's worst storms, I think about the people over in Mayfield, Kentucky. Some of them, no doubt, were delirious. That word, afraid. They were delirious. They didn't know what to think. No way they could understand. And only a few of them would know peace. Interesting as well, Jesus is not moved by the storm, is he? He's not moved at all. What moved him? What caused him to awaken? By the crisis in men's hearts. There's no crisis in Jesus, is there? He very much convinced. But it's the crisis in men's hearts that Jesus responds to. Whether it's somebody with a demon that comes to him, or somebody that's lame or blind, or this crisis in their life for which there's no other answer. When they come to them, that's what he responds to. You know, what's he said? He came to heal the sick, not those who are healthy. Those who are in spiritual crisis. Yeah, they're shaken up. And he's got to be the solution to that crisis. Yes, sir.
So at that point in time, he was a physical Savior and a spiritual Savior.
He's proven several very important things about his nature. You know, the question comes, who then is this? Obviously, we're to understand he's the Son of God, but what's he proven about himself? He's proven that he is a human Christ. He's a human Christ. When he got into the boat, he was wearied by a long day's work. I mean, it's the first chance he found a place to lay his head. Likely not going to be for much more than a nap. And it's long enough for skilled fishermen to paddle a few miles, you'd think. But what's he proving? A little noise? No problem. Dino, remember when I've been known to sleep through a hailstorm that pretty much wrecked the house? You know? But proven in that he is the Son of God. Son of man, but being human, still being fully God. He is fully God. How's that proven in this scene? How is it proven in this scene? Pardon?
Control over nature.
With just a word. Again, he's proven he could do it without a word, but for teaching those who are yet without faith, he had to say something. So with just a word, speaking really for the sake of the hearers, to quiet the storm. Again, he's proven, Roger, you mentioned authority, he's proven by this, he's almighty powerful. So he's a human Christ, he's a divine Christ, he's also a teaching Christ. When people are seeking to know, those who would be his own disciples, we've talked about it several times in Mark, are those who are asking questions. Those who are asking questions. Sometimes we see it quite often. People who are yet without faith or without strong faith, and something tragic happens to their lives. What do people ask? Why does it happen to me? Or sometimes people who have even been Christians and things go haywire, they go, well, God's not doing anything for me. You ever heard that one? It's pretty sad, isn't it? Not doing anything for me? Yeah, yes.
I know I always go back to Judy, but she had no control of life. She depended on you, God. But still, her faith, her trust, she is content. I learned so much from her example.
Do you personally know anybody that was more content than she was? No.
That's just amazing.
You know, that was a woman that we met in Scottsbluff, who was similarly had been racial addiction. She told us the rest of the God, and God was taking care of her, even when her father died, and God was going to take care of her. And she had no line of word in her face, no gray hair. And she looked like she was in her 20s, and she was just perfectly content. That was an eye-opening experience, because we age ourselves like
And so at every opportunity, this human Christ, this divine Christ, this teaching Christ, is giving disciples every opportunity. Every circumstance is an opportunity for teaching. And of course, teaching affirmed by miracles, proving that he can do what no other man can do. What's the fourth thing he's proving? The human Christ, the divine Christ, the teaching Christ. Number 4, truly cares for souls that are in danger of destruction. You cannot make a reasonable case against that, can you? Is there any reason for any of us here to doubt that Jesus is concerned when their souls are troubled, that when they're fearful? Yes, Jen?
The thing I saw, as the years went by when I saw more and more, is that people were moving their children, in Boise, constantly, to the best school. I call them local schools, they just protect them and everything. There wasn't any other families that were downcast or, not in control and things like that. And I kept thinking about all these children that it was happening to them, and I thought, where do they learn that life is not fair? And the parents keep protecting. And then what happens to them when something is really bad? Because I feel like instead of them seeing the parents as the protector clear through their adult years, they should be taught that God is their protector. But it's not happening in these nations very much anymore. And I feel that we have a whole lost generation of kids that don't know where to turn to or what to do.
Well, there is that sense, whether it's parents or I think just broadly in a sense that we can choose for ourselves what is the ideal environment for our kids, and I'll put them here and I'll put them there, and I can protect them and I can be all things to them. Which one of us here as parents have been all things that our children needed? Not by a fair shot. And so it does have to come down to this. When do we learn those kind of hard lessons? Through these kind of situations. Yeah. What a question. Interesting. Just as he was, well, he was deity. He was authority. He was almighty powerful to prove, in fact, who he is. Marvelous. Sometimes we do have to be rocked and rocked hard. But extraordinary that Jesus cares in such a powerful, personal way to give life. Guess we'll wrap it up right there.